Hello, welcome to the instruction video for Module 12. We are now beginning Unit 4 of the course. I'm really excited for us to be really working with statistical analyses now. We've all come such a long way in terms of our ability to look at information and evaluate it critically through the use of hypothesis testing and probability. I want to remind you that you should be completing your Canvas assignments by the due dates. These assignments include your usual video response, your usual discussion board and peer responses, and your chapter quiz. For this module, we will be focusing on Chapter 10 of your OER, and the focus of Chapter 10 is running independent samples t-tests. We will not be running an independent samples t-test using JASP for the computer assignment, but this is a really important chapter for us. We're continuing to build on our understanding of t-tests, and we have looked at both hypothesis testing in a general sense of whether we're considering a z-test or a t-test. Remember that we conduct t-tests when we don't have specific information about the population that we can use in our equations. We need to estimate those based on the sample. Remember that we covered a simple t-test, which is a test of one group. We went on to look at the repeated measures or paired sample t-test in our last module. This is where we're looking at either one group at 2 time points, or we're looking at matching or pairing our samples. Now remember, all of that work was looking at the prediction of one or the same independent variable. We're going to continue to build on these skills in this particular module by looking now at independent groups t-test. This means that the groups have no affiliation or no connection, and that we're comparing the sample means from these groups to see if they are significantly different from one another. We'll continue to use the 4 steps that we have already introduced in hypothesis testing. This means that we're going to be stating our null and alternative hypothesis. We'll be looking at the t-table to establish our critical values and compare those to our t-observed value. We'll be conducting the statistical analysis in step 3, and then in step 4 we make the decision. Hopefully that feels like a review to you. If it doesn't, go ahead and go back and look at hypothesis testing chapter to remind yourself of the 4 steps of hypothesis testing. For independent groups t-tests, this is a really important statistical tool that we use in psychology and in medicine. And the reason I bring this up is that this is really the foundation of medical research, especially when we're looking at a particular medicine. Take, for example, the idea of establishing 2 separate groups. We'll have the placebo or control group, and then we'll have the treatment group that actually receives the medication. So it makes sense that if we're trying to evaluate the effectiveness of a medication, that we're going to look at that medication changing the sample mean on whatever independent variable it is that we're looking at. For example, something like blood sugar. If we're testing a new drug to determine if it's effective at controlling blood sugar, we would administer that drug to one sample, and then we would administer a placebo to a second sample. And if the blood sugar level of the treatment group is significantly lower than that of the placebo group, we are able to make the decision that the drug appears to be effective. There is also a really interesting example that I liked from your textbook that had to do with movies. Many of us are interested in movies. I, in particular, like comedy movies. Other people don't. They really like horror films. The example from your textbook looked at how seeing a particular movie influenced your mood after the movie. And the group was divided into two separate samples. The sample of people who watched a comedy and the sample of people who watched a horror film. And then the t-test was conducted on their mood after they watched each of those movies. So you can see there that nobody watched both movies and that the independent variable that was assessed after the condition of watching the movie was mood. So it's the same independent variable. The data for that is listed in your PowerPoint. The calculations are in your PowerPoint. They're also listed in your chapter for this module. I encourage you to go back and look at that just to see how it is that we kind of crunch the numbers. But really what's important here is for you to understand the concept of comparing two groups on the same variable and really the interpretation of what it means when our t observed exceeds the t critical value. So if you have any questions independent samples t-tests or any other content-based question for the course, please post those on the Q&A, discussion board, or go ahead and send me an email. If you would like to set up optional office hours, we can go ahead and do that. I look forward to seeing you back in the next instruction video for this course.